Good afternoon, everyone. Let me ask those of you please to take your seats and we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us for today's conversation. I'm Damon Wilson, Executive Vice President at the Atlantic Council. And on behalf of our President and CEO, Fred Kemp, our Chairman, Governor Huntsman, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you here for this conversation. I'm delighted that we're able to welcome Tord Lien, the Norway's Minister of Petroleum and Energy, to be with us today for this important conversation. Norway is obviously a great ally. Norway has been an extraordinary partner of the Atlantic Council itself. We're delighted to welcome Ambassador Aas with us today. But Norway is also an energy superpower, hence our meeting today. Just over a year ago, the Atlantic Council launched our Global Energy Center, and at the time we recognized that robust engagement on pressing global energy issues was critical to the Atlantic Council's mission. Norway is at the nexus and the center of this nexus of issues of our mission with what's happening on the energy equation today. And I'm pleased to say that under the leadership of our founding director, Ambassador Dick Morningstar, the Global Energy Center has hit the ground running. From energy geopolitics to climate change to new energy technologies, the center advances innovative solutions that enhance prosperity and security of our key allies and partners across the world. And in its inaugural year, the center has established itself as a hub for this important conversation and discourse, as well as thought leadership in the energy sphere, hosting more than 50 events like the one we're having today, publishing a dozen reports. In fact, today, Ambassador Morningstar, David Karani, some of the leaders of the center are in Europe rolling out a report from the Atlantic Council on the impact of U.S. LNG exports on European energy security itself. So that's a backdrop for today's conversation here in Washington, a conversation that comes at an important moment in the world of energy. In the wake of COP21 climate agreement in Paris, countries across the globe are facing unique challenges and opportunities to provide access to affordable and reliable energy while reducing carbon emissions. And Europe, our key allies and partners, are seeking to create an integrated, energy-secure market that will help to power the global transition to more secure and cleaner energy systems. And while renewable energy will play an essential role in this effort, the expanding use of natural gas is essential and critical, and it's key producers like Norway that will be play that crucial role in the coming years. So in this context, I'm delighted to welcome the minister who's joined us to share his insights on the role that Norwegian gas can play in an effort to increase European supply security, as well as address the environmental issues that come up in our discussions about tapping the Arctic. A member of the Norwegian Parliament a member of the Norwegian Parliament for the Progress Party since 2005, Minister Lien has served as Norway's Minister of Petroleum and Energy since 2013. In his role, the minister oversees the management of Norway's energy resources, including renewable energy systems and the hydrocarbon resources. So once again, thank you, Mr. Minister, for being with us today. As we begin the conversation, please feel free to join this on-the-record discussion using AC Energy, hashtag AC Energy, Global Energy, or hashtag AC Energy. So without further ado, let me invite the minister to come to the podium to deliver his remarks, and then Anne Medallia, of our Deputy Director of our Energy Center, will moderate our conversation. Thank you so much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, allow me first of all to say that I'm delighted to be here and in this event organized by our friends in the Atlantic Council. I also have to say that I've had 3 fantastic days discussing energy issues with U.S. authorities and U.S. industries down in Houston from Monday. So I'll try to say a few words, of course, with a perspective coming from the Norwegian energy industries on 3 issues. The need to develop sustainable energy systems on a global level, Norwegian gas exports as part of the solution, and the importance of well-working, well-functioning markets and markets including price on carbon. Well, last year, the countries of the world adopted not only the climate change agreement in Paris just before Christmas, of course a very important agreement, but also set the new sustainable development goals for 2030. A consensus on both these in both these areas is not only important, but also closely interrelated. The world population is growing and will continue to grow. Extreme poverty has to be eliminated. Social inequalities should be leveled out, and everybody universally should have access to high-level and affordable energy. And at the same time, we have to build global energy systems that are sustainable. And the Paris Agreement was a significant step forward in the global fight against climate change. And the climate change being a global challenge, the solutions also needs to be found in global cooperation. So, what we are trying to argue from Norway's side is that global sustainable development has to be supported by energy systems on a global level that also are sustainable. But what often is forgotten, I believe, when we are discussing this topic of sustainability and sustainable global energy systems, is that there are three equal important pillars sustainability has to rest on. One of them is, of course, to have an environmentally sustainable global energy system. An energy system that more than today answers on the climate challenge. But we also need to maintain global energy systems that support economic growth, jobs, and value creation. And that was the other foot, economic sustainability. And third, the social pillar of sustainability. We need to build global energy systems that actually support high-level energy to an affordable price for a growing global population. And I guess this is something the Atlantic Council is very much concerned about, maintaining systems that are able to deliver energy at all time, security of supply. And while I am a big enthusiast for renewable energy, Norway being powered 96–97% of hydropower, we have some wind power also, I think we need to realize that in the real world, fossil fuels will have to play an important role also in the decades ahead. Energy efficiency is important, especially in the well-developed countries. Energy efficiency could help reduce growth in demand for energy. But fossil fuels, nonetheless, are and will be important, not only important, but probably also the backbone of global energy supplies for decades ahead. Therefore, one of my points here today, Norwegian oil, but not least gas production, is part of the solution, not a part of the problem. And of course, the task facing the global society in creating this energy system with affordable energy for all, supporting jobs and growth, and reducing CO2 emissions is an immense challenge. Increased levels of ambitions coming out of Paris before Christmas, I think it needs to lead to even more focus on cost-effective solutions in the way further. And being a member of one of the right-wing parties is, of course, in Norway, is of course one part of it, but various cabinets from Norway has for really decades now been arguing, because we believe in the market in Norway, though somebody in the United States tends to think otherwise. We strongly believe in market solutions. And therefore, we have been arguing for a global price of CO2 emissions for many decades. I strongly believe that this would be a key driver for the industry to identify the most cost-effective ways of reducing CO2 emissions. We put a CO2 tax in place for the activities on the NCS in 1991. That has reduced CO2 emissions from the continental shelves with about 5 million tons. 5 million tons in the US economy sounds puny, I know, but 5 million tons represents 10% of the total CO2 emission in Norway based on tax on CO2 emissions offshore. The European Union established their cap and trade system called ETS. It's still the main instrument in Europe's policies to fight climate change. Norway supports strengthening the ETS so that it, to a larger degree, could play a role as a technology-neutral and cost-effective driver for low-carbon investments. And believing strongly in the market, I also strongly believe in the point that the use of price mechanism is superior to all other measures when it comes to efficiently achieving CO2 emission reduction. Let me put it another way. Putting a tax on CO2 challenges the industry to bet their money on finding the good solutions. I tend to believe that the industries are best qualified to take these solutions, especially if they have to bet their own money. The other alternative are subsidies. The other alternative to actually fight climate change will be subsidies, prohibitions and subsidies. And for me, that is asking industries and politicians to bet taxpayers' money on finding the best solutions. So I think it is better to ask the industry to bet their money to find the solutions than to ask the taxpayers' money to be bet on political decided solutions. That was an Americanized way of arguing for a tax. Did it work? Anyway, these policies would trigger, for instance, one of the quickest and easiest means to reduce CO2 emissions fast, replacing coal with gas. Coal is by far the biggest driver of climate change. So the first step towards a more sustainable global energy system should be to reduce the use of coal. Coal covers 1/3 of global energy use. Coal use has increased by 74% since 1990. And coal can easily be replaced by cleaner gas in power production. By doing this, by replacing coal with gas, emission per unit power produced is reduced by 50%. It is a fast and cost-effective way to reduce emission in coal-using countries, which there are many of in Europe. But gas also effectively backs up intermittent renewable sources, which are increasingly represented in the northwestern European economies. Intermittent sources like solar and wind that doesn't produce when the sun is not shining and the wind is not blowing. So also for that reason, gas should be utilized in a larger extent in European energy systems. And look at what happened here. The United States of America, not being committed by the Kyoto Protocol. Still, the CO2 emissions have significantly reduced. And even though there are fantastic things happening in solar energy and wind power, the main driver for reduced CO2 emissions in the United States has been replacing coal with gas. I don't know if that is a statement you get to hear from the administration of today, but that is a fact. And that is a fact also the British government tends to follow. They have decided in the next 10 years to scrap all coal-fired power plants in the British Isles. Another example of a country wanting to benefit from increased use of gas to achieve their climate and energy goals, while maintaining a cost-effective energy system nationally. The UK story is also a proof that price on carbon actually works. With a carbon price 4 times higher than the EU ETS, gas now competes well with coal in the UK power sector. In Norway, we still have large untapped gas resources on the Norwegian continental shelf. A lot of it is located outside the part of the country where I was born in northern Norway. And every time I speak to an international audience, I think it's important, being born and raised in the Arctic, to clarify some misconceptions around the Arctic and the north of Norway. First, the Arctic is not a region of high tension. There is no race for natural resources in the area, and the high north, most importantly, the high north and the Arctic regions of the world are not homogeneous, but they are highly diverse. The Norwegian high north is very, very different from other parts of the Arctic. The climate conditions, as well as the operational challenges, vary substantially throughout the Arctic regions. Norway's Arctic is mostly ice-free. Mainland Norwegian Arctic is entirely ice-free. And that's why we call Norwegian Arctic the blue Arctic. Due to the Gulf Stream coming from, really bringing energy from the United States to Norway, in a God-given way, I should probably say. Climate and weather conditions are totally different and not comparable at all to Arctic regions in the United States, and makes Arctic regions in Norway much more similar to other parts of our own continental shelf. And you see on the map that ice conditions are not at all comparable between Alaska, Siberia, Canada, and Norway. And while I think I have to say that the Norwegian Arctic is not and will not become neither a museum or a natural reserve. It is a place people live and work. And I've said a few times already, I was born in the Arctic, but the fact that I was born in the Arctic never struck me as important in any way before I started my career in national politics, meeting my friends and colleagues from Europe and North America. This is not a desolate, frozen and remote part of the world. On the contrary, 500,000 people live in our 3 Arctic counties. Universities, 2 universities, roads, ice-free harbors, and the most densely populated Arctic area in the world. And of course, economic activity is fundamental to maintain these viable communities in the northern regions of Norway. Both the petroleum sector and fisheries, aquaculture, and development of mineral resources are important sectors in that aspect. And of course, it is important to maintain the conflict level between these sectors at a minimum, and Norway has 40 to 50 years experience in doing that. Fisheries and petroleum activities do live and should live side by side. We have more than 100 years of experience of industrial scale activity in these waters. We have been producing oil and gas for exploring for oil and gas for more than 35 years. We have already an LNG facility, a gas field and LNG facility in operation in the region, and 2 large oil fields under development. And of course, like everywhere else on the Norwegian continental shelf, the activities also in this water will have to respect our high standards for health, environment, and safety. Actually, the gas pipeline system connecting the Norwegian resources to our European market last year passed the Arctic Circle. So in a few years, we will be able to transport gas in the pipeline system from our Arctic region to our customers in Europe. Of course, one important part of the Norwegian government's policies is to maintain high activity levels in the high north. The resources in the region is crucial to make the necessary discoveries to sustain long-term production. Therefore, we will pursue this by continuing to award more acreage both in mature and in frontier areas in the region. With the Maritime Delimitation Treaty concluded with Russia in 2011, a new and vast area came under undisputed Norwegian jurisdiction. This year, we are gonna, for the first time, awarding production licenses in this area. And the interest from the industry, including many US companies, is high. The upcoming awards and the exploration that will follow will be really interesting. And speaking about US companies, back in 1969, Phillips Petroleum did its first discovery. Production started in 1971, and since 1990, gas exports have increased significantly from the Norwegian continental shelf and mainly to our European Union customers. The increase since 1994 to 2015 has been by a factor of 4. And last year, for the first time, value of our gas export exceeded that of our oil exports. So gas is important for Norway, but gas is also a vital source of energy for Europe. It is crucial for maintaining electricity security and residential heating during winters and all year round as a feedstock for European industry. More than 250 million Europeans rely on gas on a daily basis. Commercial companies engaged at our shelf deliver almost a quarter of Europe's gas use. And we are, most years, the second largest exporter to Europe after Russia. Last year we were bigger, but normally we are second biggest exporter to Europe. Our gas is mainly exported through an extensive and well-functioning pipeline system. A grand total of 8,300 kilometers of pipeline connects Norwegian gas resources to customers in Europe. And 8,300 kilometers, that's actually longer than my flight from Oslo to Houston. So, Norway is important for EU for gas supplies. In the same way, the European Union is important to Norway for gas demand. Security of supply and security of demand are closely interrelated, two sides of the same coin. Oops, oh, sorry, I missed a few spots, sorry. So far, only a third of our estimated gas resources have been produced. Another third are expected to be produced over the next 20 years. The final third will be left for production beyond 2035. There are exciting times in front of us in terms of exploration, particularly in our high north region. In other words, the Norwegian gas machine will be able to continue to deliver energy to Europe for decades to come. I am confident on behalf of the Norwegian gas resources. We have professional companies from Norway, from the US, and from Europe. We have a stable and predictable regulatory framework. The companies know that they will meet strict HES standards, but they also know that these won't go through fast changes. The industry knows that they will meet a skilled and efficient bureaucracy. That probably also thinkable for Americas, but I think I have to say really strongly that the civil servants managing our gas resources are amongst the most efficient in Europe, at least. We have a flexible and reliable gas transport system to Europe, and not least, we do have the resources necessary to compete in a well-functioning market for the long term. Speaking about well-functioning markets, a well-functioning integrated European gas market is the best way to create value from Norwegian gas resources. That gives producers at the shelf the right incentives to maximize the value of their Norwegian assets. And I've often been asked, being here in the United States, do we see LNG coming out of the United States as a threat? No, we don't. We see it as a competition, but not as a threat. We are used to competing. We are used to competing, and I think we have to just adapt to the changes coming on. So, competition in a well-functioning market makes everyone better, doesn't it? Companies on the Norwegian continental shelf have, in many occasions, shown strong ability to adapt to changing market conditions, and for a security perspective, diversified supply sources is also a prerequisite for well-functioning markets and for strong security of gas supply in Europe. And strong security of supply is in turn essential to maintain the attraction of natural gas in the European market. As such, Norway do strongly support the EU goal of increased diversification of gas supply sources, especially by strengthening their internal pipeline infrastructure. In Norway, as I already mentioned, we have a strong competitive resource base. We can deliver energy security and help EU countries reduce their emissions by switching from coal to gas. And more than 30% of our untapped gas resources are estimated to be in the northern region. I already mentioned that. In the coming years, companies will have to decide on how to expand gas exports capacity from the area. There are two alternatives, obviously. One is to connect a gas pipeline from the northern region to our existing systems further south. This is, of course, the most cost-effective solution. And the second option is liquefaction and export of LNG by ship. LNG, less cost-efficient, but offers more market flexibility to the producers. If they feel confident about future gas demand from the European Union, the likelihood of pipeline alternative increases. Improved demand security will help to ensure that essential investments in the gas sector will be made. Norway is ready. The European Union can benefit from pipeline gas from our high north in decades to come, if they so choose. Also, the role of gas in Europe's climate policies should be recognized, as it was in the EU Commission's gas strategy coming out last month. Energy security is at the heart of the debate on gas in Europe. In some European Union countries, questions are raised when it comes to the security of gas supplies. And I think it's fair to mention that based on historical data, historical experience, gas from Russia, and even before that the Soviet Union, has been a reliable source of energy for Europe. Gas supplies have remained stable through decades, even during the Cold War. And there have been no major disruption to supplies if we recognize the challenge an exporter of gas faces if the customers does not pay for your products. New LNG facilities, storage capacity, pipeline interconnections, reverse stream capacity have been constructed in the last 15 years. This has improved the functioning of the gas market and has enhanced gas security significantly. The essence of the gas security issue for Europe is that of those countries, those few countries that still depend on a single source of supply. And this means that policy measures must aim at the challenges of these isolated markets rather than uniformly across Europe. And that is also reflected in the European Commission's gas strategy. Many countries are heavily dependent on gas import, but at the same time, they enjoy a high level of energy security because their supplies are diversified. Gas from new sources like the US LNG market will enhance this level of security. For a very large part of Europe, gas security is good. The work must, however, continue, and we do, from the Norwegian side, strongly support efforts in the European Union and the EU countries to further improve the functioning of the market, including establishment of more infrastructure underpinning the efficiency of the market and development of an effective regulatory framework. These are all crucial preconditions for energy security, affordable energy, and an effective European Union climate policy. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to approach the end of this. Okay, so trying to look into the future in these turmoil times is not necessarily very easy. We do, however, first and foremost hope that we will see a fully integrated and well-functioning European market. The signals coming out of the European Union Commission for the time being gives me reasons for optimism. But this is a prerequisite not only for efficient utilization of the energy resources, but also for security of supply and a sustainable energy system in Europe. Gas has an important role to play in all aspects. Diversified supply sources, both from the east and the west, are very much welcome. This will ensure that gas continues to be an attractive energy source for Europe. Also, European climate policies, if the focus on cost effectiveness is enhanced, should increase the attractiveness of gas. I am, ladies and gentlemen, convinced that gas in general, and of course Norwegian gas in particular, will continue to play an important role for sustainable and cost-effective European and global energy systems. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for coming to speak with us today. That was very informative and at parts very frank, so we really appreciate that. I think I've been informed many times by every Norwegian that your Arctic is not the same as the rest, so I appreciate that again. So starting us off, I think the amazing thing about Norway and what a lot of us here are interested about is that you utilize a lot of your electricity comes from renewables. You're a major hydrocarbon exporter, but you also have a CO2 tax, and you're focused on good governance around the world. So I think there's a lot that we can try to unpack here today. But before we do, I wanted to kind of zoom out from Norway and focus on kind of the larger global gas markets. You've been at CERAWeek for the last couple days. How do you and how are others seeing the big changes that are happening in gas markets? How do you think that's going to impact Norway? And what are we as consumers and or as producers not thinking about right now?
Well, if you look at Asia Pacific, you see, especially Australia, you see a significant increase in export capacity. You'll see more LNG coming out of the American markets, the US markets. Of course, the price levels in the US market is very, very good for consumers, to put it in that way. Yeah. The gas market, global gas, we've never had a global gas market before, have we?
No.
We are moving towards a global gas market, probably for the first time in history, with so much resources coming already out on Asia Pacific, soon from under development, some projects in the United States, and in a generation perspective, probably also from the east coast of Africa, a player that we have never related to before at all. It's never been a part of the equation. So we'll see a global gas market. And that helps create confidence in gas as an energy carrier. It's good for Norway. good for all gas consumers. You can't build this without, it will lead to more transparency in the markets, good for everybody. I think transparency in markets are good also for producers in the long term. So yeah, the global gas markets will change. And okay, so let's look at India, for instance. Where does India go? Does India choose to continue produce power from coal with all this gas in their own water, not in their own waters, but very close? Or do they choose to increasingly move towards gas-fired power instead? That could, with low prices of LNG, it will increase consumption of gas.
So is Norway working with countries like China and India to try to increase their use of natural gas? Or how are you all working with large, rapidly developing countries leading up to COP21 and post COP21?
No, we are, this is a little, most of this work is being done in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or under the foreign minister's control, but we are having a lot of activity in Africa, mostly in renewable power production. And of course, Norwegian services are telling members of the civil servants from these countries about our experience and how we have been working really to utilize the greatest possible value of all our energy resources, being water, hydro, or oil and gas.
Great. So moving back to Europe, you've talked a lot about how Europe needs to send signals to Norway and to other producers, whether they're going to use more gas, and if that's going to be LNG or piped. So with the EU's kind of energy security proposal that they put forth last week, the LNG strategy, is that sufficient, or is it even possible for them to give you the signals that you need to make these decisions now? And then my follow-up question would be, what do you think of Nord Stream 2? Obviously a competitor, but at the same time, the decisions that the EU makes on it could also affect other third country suppliers to Europe.
Well, on the first question, again.
First question had to do with, is the LNG strategy that was put forth sufficient to major producers?
No, well, what we have been, so what part, I was trying to say, so how do you achieve climate goals? By giving market signals to the market players, to the industries, and allowing the industries to take their decisions. Europe has tended to use huge amounts of subsidies going in all directions. They're ending in some European Union countries, you have ended up with an energy system that even more than before relies on coal. So we are spending billions of euros to reduce CO2 emissions, and you end up spending more coal than before.
Yeah, I recently read a great report that showed that had Europe actually switched towards gas instead of coal over the last 5 or 7 years, emissions would have been 15% lower.
And that's what we want, that's the message we want to put through to our friends in Europe. So, and I think the gas, so put price signals into the system and allow the market players, the market participants find the good solutions. The bet some European Union countries has put forward based on taxpayers and energy customers' money to reduce CO2 emissions has mainly reduced a whole lot of costs and not too much CO2 reductions. And that is what Amber Rudd, my colleague in Britain, has understood when she puts forward her strategy, replacing coal with gas. And I think also the production of gas in the EU 28 is already in depletion, and it will be even more so in depletion. So when the European Commission says that, okay, in 15 years we will consume just as much gas as today, that means room for a whole lot more import.
Yeah.
So I think where I think this is no secret for those who have been following European energy policies. I was concerned a little bit, I have to admit, in the summer of 2014. But I think we have seen a few positive developments, significant positive developments since then. And the Nord Stream, well, I think one of the key reasons why I'm a little too
Animated there.
one of the key reasons why security of supply has been enhanced in the later years, the 10, 15 later years in Europe, has been the increased focus on strengthening gas infrastructure. Reverse stream, new pipelines, huger stores. So of course to continue to build this system, to build new infrastructure will support increased security of supply. When it comes on Nord Stream, it's about a lot more, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just another pipeline. But really, Germany and Russia have to decide on whether to build it or not. I think Norway. I'm more than willing to tell my friends in all countries our good experience on what we have been doing on the NCS, but I try to stay away from giving advice, especially to super major neighbors like Russia and Germany.
Just wanted to see how far I could get with you today.
And the US.
All right, so moving away from gas, Norway is still a very significant oil producer. We've been at Zero Week. We've heard a lot of talk about this freeze in output. What's Norway's opinion on that, and kind of how do you see, going back to the question on changing global gas markets, how do you see the impact of low oil prices impacting Norway, impacting other producers, and larger geopolitical considerations?
Well, the oil price going from 115 to, I think everybody in the oil industry agrees that some of the habits that were taken on board between 2009 and 2014, coming to the cost level increase and all that, they were not sustainable anyway. So the oil industry needed a shakeup. But of course, this is not a shakeup. This is not a shakeup. $400 billion of investments are gone. Some of it is gone because of cost reductions, but most of it is just gone. And this will, of course, influence supply in the years ahead, especially if this continues. This will influence supply. And the oil production and the stocks, the oil production and the stocks today are really high. The oil production is decreasing. But of course, a lot of this production is production that would have come on stream in 5 years. FID today, production in 5 years. And that production is just not going to come. But I think the industry is really, really rolling up the sleeves, preparing for lower price levels. The price will have to come back. When all these resources don't come to market, the price will rise. Let's hope the oil and gas industry, and I think they are going to be, and I definitely hope they will be, ready to face the upturn when it comes in an efficient manner. Of course, otherwise, okay, let's face it. Even somebody said 2 years ago that shale will disappear if the oil price hits 80. Well, it didn't, did it? But shale, bleeding, oil sands, almost at least in a respirator. That would. Offshore oil and gas, we have one super major field development going on now profitable with today's prices, but of course not. We're going to struggle a whole lot to get profitability out of oil and gas, oil resources on the NCS based on $33 a barrel. So you end up with having oil producers in countries that we, that will be highly relevant in a security debate, like Iran, Iraq, Saudis. They will, because that oil will be profitable no matter what happens, more or less.
Are there any countries that you're particularly concerned about in kind of a low price environment from a political perspective?
I try to stay very close to energy policies in my answers here. Not only does Børge Brende, my Minister of Foreign Affairs, follow these kinds of debates. He's even here in Washington, so I have to be really careful. No, but I think to have, being a strong believer in the market, if you have a lot of suppliers, there is no reason to be afraid of anybody, because where the oil comes from is irrelevant. So I think that has to be the focus. We have to maintain a drive to keep oil and gas flowing from our countries, from the US, from Europe, from Canada. And then, of course, if we can achieve that, these more challenging countries will be less relevant in that kind of perspective.
How does this price environment impact future production in the Arctic? So we talked about how important that is to Norway's long-term production plan.
Well, I think the answer to that is really, really different between the Churchill Sea, where you have a possibility for maritime operations like 2 to 3 months every year, and the Norwegian Arctic, where you actually right now, in February, we are conducting a drilling operation in the northernmost open areas in our shelf. So, of course, what you have to face in the north, you have to see some heavy lifting on infrastructure. But if you really do a major discovery, that infrastructure will come, and then you will probably look at price levels that are not very different from price levels in other parts of the Norwegian continental shelf. Could maybe be a little higher, but in general, it will be quite similar to the price levels we do need in the southern parts of the continental shelf.
Interesting. So my last question before I throw it open to the floor is more on the good governance side. So what's very impressive about Norway is your ability to develop a really well-functioning economy with such amazing resources, your sovereign wealth fund, and then also your commitment, which I know might fall more within your Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to good governance measures. So I was wondering if you could kind of talk through that process with us of how has Norway set this up? What lessons do you have for other major countries that are either reforming their systems right now or will eventually, maybe post low price collapse, might end up producing more? And maybe just also address how a sovereign wealth fund should be used with regards to investments. So you have your sovereign wealth fund looking to divest from coal or from countries or from companies that are investing in more unsavory countries. And so how do you all kind of square the financial side with this more political side? That's a lot of questions packed into one.
Well, yeah. So I'm going to need half an hour. No, I think really a really good Norwegian good governance start by resource management. There has been the idea behind how we have managed our energy resources based on really the law we made in the 19th century for hydropower. So the target is to bake as large a cake as you can. So the resources should be utilized in a manner that creates the most value. You bake a big cake, number one. Number two, we have put together a tax system. A tax system that puts a heavy tax on income. So bake a huge cake, make sure that the government keeps most of it, basically. Or the taxpayers who actually owns the resources, according to Norwegian law. But we've also put together a tax system that mediates risk. Mediates risk between government and industries. And this, I think, is one of the reasons why we see when other countries wants to award acreage, they see significantly reduced interest. But the Norwegian tax system is probably one of the reasons why we see continued interest, also from US companies, but from companies everywhere around the globe, for new acreage on the NCS. So high tax, but also a fair tax and a risk-sharing kind of frame around this. And so, of course, one of the reasons why we established the Sovereign Wealth Fund was to make sure that the Norwegian economy didn't overheat. Today, of course, everybody in Norway is really happy that we are not spending oil revenue in next year's budget, because the revenue has been significantly reduced, but we are only using the dividends from the fund in the next year's budget. And of course, I think the main the main task for the fund is to maximum value creation, like it was. Okay, so the oil and gas income created the fund, and the fund's main principles are really the same for the energy resource management: create as much value as possible. And for this is one of the biggest funds in the world, and that doesn't make Norway a particularly big country. So I think but the main focus of the fund also in the future should be maximize value creation instead of trying to address a whole lot of other issues. Mm-hmm. That could be political controversial. So it's not going to, it shouldn't probably be an agent for Norwegian foreign policies. It should maintain focus on maximizing value also in the future. And of course, we are spending money, but not in a sovereign wealth fund. We are spending money on energy efficiency, power production, research and development, CCS, globally, with China, with India, with South Africa, and so on and so forth. But that's not in the frame of the sovereign wealth fund.
Thank you. That was great. So I'd love to throw it open to the floor. If you could wait for a mic to be handed to you and give your name and your association, please. So we'll go with the gentleman. And actually, since we have a mic, right, we'll go with the gentleman back there. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Robin Laird. Just want to ask you, you did a very good presentation on the market. And then, well, when you talk about security, you primarily went to the pipeline network, which is an issue, particularly from Russia to Germany. But isn't obviously underlying the functioning market, safety, security, development, and defense in the high north? And certainly the Canadians and the Danes, I work a lot with the Danes, are very concerned about security and defense, notably because of the Russians. So what's your thinking about Norway's position on safety, security, and defense of the high north as allowing you to have the well-functioning market that you want to have? Because it isn't just a market.
No, I totally agree with you. Of course, that Norway, together with our friends in NATO, has been able to avoid being persuaded by forces in other parts of the world to move away from the market economy is, of course, a fundamental reason why we have been able to produce this fantastic system. And of course, we are also noticing that military expenditure in Russia is increasing. Europe, together with our allies across the Atlantic, should of course reply to that. But you're really far away from my area of expertise and my responsibility in the cabinet. So I think I'll probably just leave it to that. I think also there is when it comes to managing the resources in the region, the region is more a region of cooperation than a conflict. So the conflict is between, the capital of this country are probably referring to, and London, Washington, Brussels, not between the Arctic regions, where the cooperation on a daily basis is fantastic, even with the armed forces of the countries involved.
All right, if we can take this woman's question in the second row, and then we'll kind of move it down this way.
Hi, I'm Jenny Mandel, a reporter with Energy Wire. You mentioned that U.S. LNG is a competition but not a threat. And I wanted to ask about that with respect to carbon trading. Obviously, you're in favor of carbon tax, not only in Europe but globally. But how significant is it, or what impacts does it have on that competition when Norway is subject to a carbon tax and the U.S. competition is not?
A fantastic question, of course. Regasification of the LNG coming onshore Europe will be subject for a carbon tax. Okay, and the shipping is nothing anyway. So, but the energy resources consumed in production of gas in the U.S. and in liquefying the gas onshore U.S. will not be subject to tax. So, of course, in all fairness, but what Europe could do to face that, I'm not suggesting it, but what Europe could do was to impose a tax on all imports to Europe that wasn't taxed on beforehand. So then the US could decide whether to allow their exporters pay tax to Europe or to just tax it itself. Probably will make it easier for US to take that decision to actually put a price on carbon.
Is that politically palatable? Is that likely to...
I'm just saying what could be put in place. I was trying even not to suggest it myself. I was just.
Yes, Ian.
We want to try to get you in a little trouble before you head back home.
I think we're doing fine.
Robert Schroeder, the international investor. Let me get this straight. Norway considers its energy assets to be the ownership and benefit of the people. It's created a strategy for its energy assets. As a result, it's one of the most solvent, fiscally secure nations in the world. Your Social Security fund, I understand, it takes care of your people quite well. Would you suggest that the United States, now that it's going to start exporting more energy, consider some of the same sort of regime?
Well, we became an energy nation based on the hydropower. That's like 100, and the management of the hydropower resources was finally established in 1897. Those principles were more or less established also for managing the oil and gas resources some 80 years later. 70 and some years later. And we could employ on this as a philosophy that the Norwegian population owns the resources. And of course in the US, some of the gas is owned by law, owned by the landowner. So I guess that will complicate the picture quite significantly. In Norway, you will own the soil, but not the hard rock. And yeah. So, but of course, I think the principle that we have had a tax system and managing the energy resources with the purpose of creating as much value as possible, and also a tax system that has made sure that the energy production benefits the entire Norwegian population. It's probably one of the reasons why 84% of Norwegian population strongly supports oil and gas industries. This pays for universities and roads, airports, not airports, but no.
Ian.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister, for your remarks. In your remarks, you spoke about energy diversification. That, of course, is a high priority for the states of Central Europe who have been working to diversify their oil and gas supplies. Earlier this month, Prime Minister of Poland visited Oslo, and I believe she came over with one key agenda item, which was the development of a pipeline that would link your territories to Poland. Do you see a need for that, and what do you see the prospects of that project?
Yeah, do I see a need for that? The technical capacity in the Norwegian gas pipelines, and that is, of course, technical, it's 125 billion cubic meters. But I think last year when we exported 115 billion cubic meters, somebody could probably do the maths on how much is that in cubic feet, but it's a significant 25% of European consumption. we'll probably not. We could be able to sustain exports and around that area. To see a significant increase above 120 billion cubic meters a year is not very likely in 10 to 15, 20 years ahead. So then, of course, we need to see a market in that part of the world that is so much better than the markets we're already connected to. And if that is likely, of course, the gas holders, gas shippers on the NCS should answer to that question, but I really don't see that as really likely.
Do they even need the pipeline to get gas from Norway?
Well, no, they don't really, because you will be able to move gas from Germany to Poland anyway. So if the gas comes on the seabed, or if it comes, I don't know, but probably what Poland needs, I don't think, I'm not quite certain if Poland has enough import capacity from the West. But of course, it could be cheaper to build more capacity towards the very well functioning markets in the northwest of Europe. I'm not too confident about that aspect of the question.
Thanks. Yes, sir.
Ralph Winnie with the Eurasia Center. I was wondering if you could discuss Norway's relationship with China in the oil and gas sphere, and China's involvement with Norway's sovereign wealth fund, and how that all might impact the United States.
Well, of course, after this is no secret, after the Nobel Peace Prize Committee awarded the Peace Prize to Liu Xiaobo, we have had quite a struggle with Norway's relationship to China, let's face it. Norwegian companies, Norwegian industries, though, are also maybe experiencing a little bit of challenging times, but not at all in the same, on the same level. Fish is still going to Asia, to China. Chinese companies are welcome to the Norwegian continental shelf at any time. They have been looking into it, I know, but and how will it influence?
Sovereign wealth fund, what kind of relationship is?
No, I think the sovereign wealth fund is in principle investing in China, but if they actually have any major investments there, I wouldn't know. I don't follow the investments in the sovereign wealth fund in that detail, but in principle, they would be able to invest in China. But if they actually do it, I don't know.
Thank you.
We're trying really hard not to make any political statements based on the sovereign wealth fund.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? We have time for about one more. Don't think so. So with that, thank you very much for joining us today. It was wonderful. We appreciate it.